Well, a very good afternoon to you all on this 30th day of our national lockdown in South Africa. My name is Mark Long and I'm rector of St Andrew's Church in Newlands, Cape Town. Just a correction on something I said yesterday. My maths has never been particularly wonderful, but it particularly let me down yesterday. In terms of the government's packages and loans that they've taken in terms of stimulus for our economy, it works out at about 8,500 rand a person, not 850,000 rand a person. But still a significant amount when you consider the many who are unemployed and how much that kind of money would mean to them right at this moment. So a need to hold our government accountable nonetheless in those areas. Today in our Eucharist readings, we continued in John's Gospel chapter 6, moved on to the story of Jesus walking on water, the disciples exhausted after the long day in which they've had the challenge of feeding the 5,000. They are rowing against a strong wind, the water is rough, they are tired and exhausted, and just as they're about to come into the shore after about 6 kilometers of hard rowing, Jesus appears walking on the water. It's again one of those stories that is confounding. How did that happen? How did it work? And certainly as a child, again, one of those stories that I loved because of the magic and the miraculous that it held. But I think importantly, right at the moment, you have the disciples tired, exhausted, fighting a storm, and suddenly there is Jesus. And they obviously are scared. It's an unusual experience. And Jesus' words are important here. He says, "It is I, do not fear." The English translation hides an important thing here, in that in the Greek, Jesus actually says, "I am, do not fear." And of course, you'll remember that I am is the name given by God to Moses in the bush when Moses says, who am I to say you are? And God says, I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. And so in the midst of this storm and the exhaustion and everything that goes with it, they hear these very profound words. I am. God is here. God is present. Do not fear. And so again, importantly in this Eastertide period, an encounter that we're asked to reflect on and just acknowledge the power and presence of God in that particular moment. And I think it's something that we can draw on in terms of where we find ourselves. After 30 days, I'm beginning to feel a bit of cabin fever. I'm fortunate in that there is a reasonable garden and decent property that I live on. But nonetheless, that desire to get back on my bicycle, to get out into the mountain, get that kind of exercise, enjoy that kind of freedom once again is really strong. And in hoping that the lockdown would end in some form at the end of next week, realizing now that level 4 life is not going to change very much for most of us, and certainly I suspect much of my life will be much of what it has been in the last 30 days. There's a whole lot of storm going on within me. There's a whole lot of emotional just up and down and a real desire to break out, as it were. And it was just helpful as I read that passage this afternoon, just to hear God saying, I am, do not fear. And just discovering a recentered space within me that said, actually, I can do this. We can do this. And importantly, to then just trust that God has given us the resources, the internal personal resources that we need to continue into whatever the future looks like. A lot of broken hopes, dreams, and everything else. I was meant to be doing a wedding for a young couple today, and I know that they're really struggling with that not happening. And so it is what it is. But in the midst of the storm, whatever the emotional storm may be, I really encourage us all to hear those words of Jesus to his disciples on the water. I am. Do not be afraid.